The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Patty Young, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the March 15th issue of the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Online, Piers Morgan is building an empire. Early this month on Piers Morgan's show, one guest called another a terrorist piece of crap as the journalist Glenn Greenwald and a retired U.S. general watched. The week before, Jeffrey Epstein's brother abruptly hung up on Mr. Morgan. A few weeks before that, the lawyer Alan Dershowitz threatened to sue the satirist Bassem Youssef during a broader debate about whether Mr. Epstein was a spy. Every week on YouTube, Mr. Morgan moderates these melees about the news, joined by government officials, emerging pundits, and conspiracy theorists. Sometimes these roles overlap. It is chaos. It is also working. Mr. Morgan's channel, Uncensored, has more than 4.3 million subscribers on YouTube, ranking him just below the Manosphere mascot Theo Von, but above Megyn Kelly, another expatriate of mainstream media. Yet behind the scenes, there is more method than madness as Mr. Morgan tries to build a new media empire. In January 2025, he took control of his channel from its previous owner, Rupert Murdoch's News UK. By the end of the year, Mr. Morgan had raised $30 million to add new shows in new categories with new hosts. Last week, he announced Rashida Jones as his first chief executive. A former president of MSNBC, since renamed MS Now, Ms. Jones presided over more than 30 anchors from the heights of 30 Rock. Now she is working from her home in New Jersey for a YouTuber. You don't get to build media worlds often, Ms. Jones said of the opportunity. Yet Mr. Morgan's history with such traditional media bosses is checkered. Although he became the youngest editor of a British newspaper in a half-century, taking over News of the World in 1994 at age 28, his tenure at another tabloid, the Daily Mirror, was more infamous. He was fired in 2004 after the paper published fake photographs of British soldiers abusing an Iraqi detainee. And though his jovial arrogance eventually won over American audiences on The Celebrity Apprentice and America's Got Talent, his CNN primetime show was canceled in 2014 amid poor ratings. He can be unpredictable. He sometimes calls his guests clowns, hypocrites, or male appendages. While he identifies as a centrist, he seems more MAGA-friendly than not, chummy with President Trump and the Fox News crowd, except for his distaste for guns, and lately, Israel. To Ms. Jones, who led a network known for its liberal slant, this is his strength. It's why people watch, she said. There's an element of surprise in his perspective. The range of guests that he has on the show is broad and wide, and they're not all aligned with his point of view. As YouTube overtakes traditional television, charismatic hosts like Mr. Morgan have reshaped the media landscape, promising to tell it like it is, free from party politics and corporate interests. They embrace being the news as much as covering it. I'm the ringmaster, Mr. Morgan said over lunch at the Carlyle, his luxury hotel of choice in New York City, where he both compared himself to Walter Cronkite and embraced those who liken him to Jerry Springer, a man in the middle. Do his debates hold a mirror up to the train wreck of modern political discourse, or do they just pour gas on an already raging fire? I genuinely think if you watch my show, Mr. Morgan said, you've got a better chance of getting to the truth than probably any other. Ownership and mini-mess. It sometimes seems Mr. Morgan can survive anything. Along with his career scandals, he has weathered phone hacking accusations from Prince Harry, which he has denied, and various celebrity beefs, like a much-hyped feud with Madonna. He has broken ribs in 2007, crashing a Segway into Santa Monica, California, and fractured a hip in January tripping on steps at a hotel restaurant in London. These misfortunes have been chronicled by the same tabloids that formed him. Mr. Morgan, who is 60, began his career at Mr. Murdoch's news empire in the late 1980s as a showbiz columnist for The Sun. 3 decades later, in 2021, they reunited. Mr. Morgan had just left Good Morning Britain after an outcry over his comments doubting the mental health struggles of Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. She joined nearly 58,000 viewers in complaining to British regulators about his insults, apparently breaking a government record and triggering an investigation. He refused to apologize and was later cleared of wrongdoing. For a reported £50 million, or about $70 million at the time, Mr. Morgan agreed to spend the next 3 years producing content across News Corp properties, tabloid columns, crime documentaries, a book for HarperCollins called Woke is Dead. He would also help start Talk TV, a television channel aspiring to rival the BBC. Talk TV faltered, but all was not lost. The channels, Piers Morgan Uncensored, also streamed on Fox Nation, found success on YouTube. Millions watched the host's explosive interviews with Andrew Tate, the chauvinistic influencer, and Fiona Harvey, the woman who claimed to inspire the stalker on Netflix's Baby Reindeer. To Mr. Morgan, the economics of YouTube's automated advertising were attractive. The more plays, the higher the payout, in perpetuity. He estimated that an hour-long interview with Priscilla Presley in 2023, which has accumulated 5 million views, generated $150,000, covering the $20,000 fee paid for her exclusivity. But until he owned his channel, those earnings were not his to keep. At the end of 2024, he asked to visit Mr. Murdoch in New York. A contract renewal was on the table, nearly as big as my last one, Mr. Morgan said. Instead, he told Mr. Murdoch that he wanted to try working for himself. I could take a really big talent deal, but actually, if I get this right, it will dwarf that, he said of his thinking. Over the next year, Mr. Morgan added 700,000 subscribers as he found business partners, financiers, and eventually a chief executive. A few months ago, one of his new agents at WME, Bradley Singer, floated Ms. Jones' name. Having left MSNBC around the same time Mr. Morgan left News UK, she was working as a consultant for one of Uncensored's new investors. In her role as chief executive, Ms. Jones' project is to assemble a cast of equally strong personalities alongside Mr. Morgan. There is already History Uncensored, hosted by Bianco Nobillo, a former CNN anchor and hobbyist archaeologist. Next, Ms. Jones will oversee the creation of shows about sports, true crime, entertainment, and beyond. I bet there's a lot of women who would love to watch a really smart, fun Beauty Uncensored, right? Mr. Morgan asked me. She'll also explore revenue opportunities in subscriptions, licensing, and events, she said. A former president of MSNBC has become his first chief executive. Oprah Winfrey and Martha Stewart built media empires, but their brands remain dependent on them, said Joe Ravitch, whose private equity firm, the Rain Group, has become Uncensored's lead investor and who has joined the Uncensored board. Piers will become an increasingly smaller and smaller part, not because his voice diminishes, but because we've been able to build up mini-me's, Mr. Ravitch said. He is also adamant that Uncensored serve a politically independent audience, challenging the perception that Mr. Morgan is right-wing. He's not at all. The question of whether Mr. Morgan might cause another career-shifting controversy like Meghan-gate does not seem to worry these new partners. For the first time in his career, he cannot really be fired or forced out. Who's going to cancel a guy who only needs an internet connection and a studio, which he owns, Mr. Ravitch said. Advertisers can pull out, but a lot of advertisers won't pull out, and other advertisers will step in for the ones who pulled out. What's funny about it? As an interviewer, Mr. Morgan tends to provoke, even agitate. He's always been very good at that, his former producer at CNN, Jonathan Wald, said, asking the right questions and getting the right performance out of the people he's with on camera. YouTube has further unleashed him. Clavicular, a 20-year-old social media star, recently warned Mr. Morgan's team before an interview that if Mr. Morgan tried to ask him about politics, he would ask Mr. Morgan about his wife, who often writes candidly about their marriage. Neither man backed down. Pierce and Clav are generations apart, but they share in common that they both know what makes for good TV on the internet, said Mitchell Jackson, a publicist for Clavicular and other personalities who have appeared on Mr. Morgan's show. Adam Mockler, a 23-year-old progressive YouTuber, said he had spent about 8 months trying to get booked on Uncensored before his first appearance. It validated me, he said. I'm now like a man in the arena. Last fall, I watched from Mr. Morgan's London studio as a panel was convened to discuss the arrest of a comedian and activist who was accused of inciting violence on social media. His post referred to punching transgender women in the genitals. Mr. Morgan, who has compared wokeism to fascism, took the position that the comedian had simply made a rather crass joke. What's funny about it? Asked Lori Penny, a feminist writer joining him in the studio. Through Mr. Morgan's earpiece, a producer guided the raucous hour-long debate toward what the producer called, in a Scottish accent, our great gotcha moment. But after Miss Penny volunteered that they were transgender and non-binary, Mr. Morgan pivoted, grilling them for several minutes. You look to me female, he said. You're a female? Are you a female? Are you a female? This has really become uncomfortably personal, Miss Penny replied, unwilling to discuss the contents of my underpants. That evening, in his dressing room, after a producer escorted Miss Penny from the studio, Mr. Morgan reflected on this type of segment as entertaining but unproductive. People get themselves into a bit of tortured mess over the language, he said. That includes him. Mr. Morgan, a stickler for grammar, had feigned ignorance over the definition of non-binary and Miss Penny's plural pronouns. I really wanted her to articulate it, he continued, declining again to use those pronouns. Miss Penny did not respond to inquiries about the appearance. I don't want to vilify trans people, Mr. Morgan offered, but he said he does want to defend the rights of people like the Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling to express their opinions about trans people. And I don't even like J.K. Rowling, he said. She doesn't like me. She's called me all sorts of things. Throughout our interviews, Mr. Morgan could sound vaguely Trumpian. Early on, he plugged his nickname for the Duchess of Sussex, Princess Pinocchio. He told stories about bumping into the hockey legend Wayne Gretzky at the Polo Bar, about emailing with the British pop star Robbie Williams, about Egyptian pyramids, about hanging a portrait of a rhinoceros made by Queen Camilla in his loo. He listed among his great friends Joan Collins, Barbara Walters, and Sharon Osbourne. He complained about people in society who took fat jabs and became crushing bores. Mr. Morgan has admired Mr. Trump since taping The Celebrity Apprentice in 2007, before which, he said, he read The Art of the Deal thrice. On their first day of production, he recalled Mr. Trump approvingly referred to him as Rupert's boy. Though they have occasionally quarreled, Mr. Morgan attended Qatar's state dinner for Mr. Trump last year and his inflammatory rally at Madison Square Garden before the election, and confirmed he would have voted for him in 2024 if he were a U.S. citizen. Mr. Morgan believes that Mr. Trump's policy contains a core of common sense, he said. It's his mouth that causes a lot of the problems. One of his most popular guests on Uncensored is the right-wing podcaster Candace Owens. Their sparring sessions over her conspiracy theories have exceeded 10 million views. Speaking to the New York Times by phone, Ms. Owens called Mr. Morgan obnoxious and a pain, who did sleazy things in his tabloid heyday. but he knows he's a pain, she said, and so it makes him quite likable. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. 2.4%, the rise in inflation in February from a year ago. Inflation remained fairly steady in February before the U.S.-Israeli attacks on Iran revived concerns that energy prices would stoke it again. According to the latest Consumer Price Index report, inflation rose 2.4% from a year ago, and core inflation, which leaves out food and energy prices, rose 2.5%. It had also risen 2.4% in January. Food prices were one of the biggest drivers of inflation last month. They rose 3.1% compared with a year earlier, with grocery prices up 2.4% and the cost of meals out up 3.9%, the New York Times' Colby Smith reported. Since the attacks on Iran began in late February, though, oil prices have jumped. Prices for Brent crude, the international oil benchmark, have risen as high as $119.50 a barrel, though they fell when President Trump suggested early last week that the war would end very soon. By Friday, prices were once again hovering around $100 a barrel. Economists warn that even if the conflict were to end immediately, oil prices may stay high for some time, affecting not just the price of gasoline, but also that of a wide range of products. Officials at the Federal Reserve will be watching whether higher prices lead consumers to lower their overall spending. The Fed is expected to hold interest rates steady at its meeting this coming week after a series of cuts late last year. With inflation renewed, worry along with a weakening labor market, the Fed is in a tough position. If the job market is getting worse and inflation is getting worse at the same time, it's not obvious to me what the immediate response should be, Austin D. Goolsbee, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, told Ms. Smith. So far this year, stocks were down. The S&P 500 was down 3.1%. Mortgage rates were up. Bankrate.com, 30-year fixed, 6.22%, up 0.02 points. Jobless claims were down. 4-week moving average down 3.2%. Contribute to a Roth now to cut the tax bill later. Beyond traditional IRAs and 401ks, an option to reduce the future financial bite. Say you're near retirement and have accumulated $1 million in your 401k. Congratulations, you're in the top tier of retirement savers. But remember, not all that money is yours. Some of it will be taxed by the federal government when you withdraw it. Most people put their retirement savings in traditional 401k plans and individual retirement accounts, and most contributions to these accounts are tax deferred. That enhances returns by allowing your investments to compound without a tax burden, and they reduce your income tax bill in your higher income working years. But more affluent retirees may find that drawing from these traditional accounts in retirement can have some undesirable side effects, including higher marginal tax rates, taxes on Social Security benefits, and surcharges on Medicare premiums. And leaving tax-deferred accounts to your heirs can create tax headaches for them. Taxes on these accounts cannot be avoided completely. We have to pay taxes sometime, says Wade Pfau, an expert on retirement income and author of the Retirement Planning Guidebook. It's really just a matter of looking for opportunities to pay taxes at the lowest possible rates. Cue the Roth account. Unlike traditional 401ks, the IRAs, both Roth IRAs and Roth savings options within workplace plans, are funded with after-tax dollars. In other words, you pay the income tax bill up front. Like a traditional 401k or IRA, your investments grow tax-free. Unlike tax-deferred accounts, Roth withdrawals are generally tax-free too, if used as intended in retirement or by your heirs. Roths also offer a way to hedge your bets against possible higher tax rates in the future, said Ed Slott, a tax expert and Roth guru. Most older people are heavily overweighted in tax-deferred accounts. They have no tax risk diversification, Mr. Slott said. These are sophisticated investors who would never put all their eggs in one basket, because that's a basic rule of investing. Yet all their eggs are in one tax basket, so they're at the mercy of a possible future higher tax bill. Most retirement savings reside in tax-deferred accounts. In 2024, investors saved $14 trillion in traditional IRAs versus $2 trillion in Roths, according to the Investment Group Institute. But the Roth is gaining popularity. The $2 trillion held in Roths in 2024 accounted for 12% of all IRA assets, up from just 4% in 2004. In 401k plans, 18% of savers in plans that offered a Roth option used it in 2024, up from 12% in 2019, according to Vanguard. The reduced tax rates passed during the first Trump administration and made permanent in last year's tax law may play a role in that growth. We're at historic lows now, and I don't see taxes going any lower than this, Mr. Slott said. Changes made to federal retirement law since 2019 encourage the use of Roth options within workplace retirement savings plans and have made Roths more compelling for people who don't expect to spend down all their savings and want to give these assets to their heirs. Here's a look at how Roths work. Who are Roths good for? You might expect your tax bills to be lower in retirement since you'll no longer have taxable wages, and that is the case for most retirees, according to research by the Investment Company Institute and the Internal Revenue Service. But retirees with large nest eggs may see their tax bills rise, especially after they start taking required minimum distributions, which begin at age 73. RMDs can force larger than desired withdrawals that push you into higher tax brackets. You're no longer contributing to a 401k, so that pre-tax deduction disappears. So do deductions for mortgage interest if you've paid off your home, and most likely deductions for dependent children. Deductible state and local taxes may be lower. Many people who have large IRAs will probably be in a higher tax bracket in retirement, Mr. Slott said, even if tax rates don't change in the years ahead. Along with higher income tax brackets, higher taxable income in retirement can trigger a larger bite from your Social Security benefits because higher income retirees pay tax on up to 85% of their benefits. Higher income retirees also pay higher premiums for Medicare Part B, outpatient care, and Part D, prescription drugs. These so-called income-related monthly adjustment amounts can increase Medicare costs substantially. There are multiple surcharge levels defined by your modified adjusted gross income. This year, the first bracket raises the standard monthly Part B premium of $202.90 by $81.20, and the second bracket doubles the standard premium amount. Retirement drawdowns from Roth accounts generally don't count toward adjusted gross income, and no RMDs are required during your lifetime. That can help retirees manage their tax bills. Contribute to Roth accounts. Contributing to a Roth IRA can make sense for younger retirement savers since they tend to be in their lower earning years and are in lower tax brackets, making tax deferral less valuable. But there are income limits on Roth contributions. This year, single filers with income up to $153,000 can contribute the full amount, $7,500, and the contribution limit phases out when your income hits $168,000. Savers with incomes higher than those amounts can make backdoor Roth contributions. You can make a non-deductible contribution to your IRA and then convert the contribution to a Roth. Much larger Roth contributions can be made within workplace retirement plans since these are subject to the $24,500 limit that applies to tax-deferred contributions this year, and there is no income cap on your eligibility to contribute. Savers age 50 and older can contribute an additional $8,000 catch-up contributions this year. Although the Secure 2.0 law passed in 2022 requires that 2026 catch-up contributions be made using a Roth option for workers who earned more than $150,000 in 2025 from employer sponsoring the plan. The $150,000 is adjusted for inflation in future years. Secure 2.0 supercharges the Roth 401k opportunity for savers aged 60 to 63. They can make a higher catch-up contribution this year of $11,250. Depending on your employer's match, the total going into a Roth 401k this year could be as high as $72,000, along with any catch-ups. Nearly all workplace plans, 95.6%, now offer Roth options, according to the Plan Sponsor Council of America. Conversions. Converting tax-deferred assets to a Roth IRA offers a way to plan for future taxes. There's no limit on how much you can convert in a given year, but the converted amount is taxable, and paying the tax from a non-retirement account preserves the Roth's full value and maximizes tax-free compounding. Conversions in retirement can also trigger higher taxation of Social Security benefits or high-income Medicare surcharges in the year you convert. While you're working, look for opportunities to convert smaller amounts that fill up the top of your highest marginal tax bracket. The early years of retirement can be a good time to convert, especially if you have not yet claimed Social Security, says Nancy Gates, lead educator at Bolden, a financial planning platform. Those are likely to be low tax years, a tax valley, and then I'm going to start drawing down that money or convert it to Roth because that tax mountain is coming. It's a good way to minimize your lifetime tax and control your tax rate. But any Roth strategy should be geared to a specific planning goal, such as leaving the highest estate value or achieving the lowest lifetime tax liability. Anyone considering a Roth conversion really needs to be clear about the goal, Ms. Gates said. Bolden offers an online Roth Conversion Explorer tool that helps clients project long-term effects of various Roth strategies. Leaving a Roth to your heirs. If you don't expect to spend down your tax-deferred retirement savings during your lifetime, consider incorporating Roth assets into your estate plan. When we talk about paying taxes at the lowest possible rate, that doesn't only apply to you, Mr. Slott said. Other people may be paying those taxes besides you. Those people include widowed spouses who can find themselves in higher marginal tax brackets once they are no longer filing joint tax returns. The household will have one less Social Security check coming in, but RMDs on tax-deferred accounts stay the same. If you plan to leave tax-deferred assets to your children, it's difficult to predict the tax bill they will pay. In 2019, the Secure 1.0 law eliminated the Stretch IRA, which allowed heirs to take distributions from inherited IRAs in small amounts over their lifetimes. Now they must take all those distributions no later than 10 years after they are inherited, and those might well be career high earning years for them. In year 10, it's 100% RMD. Everything comes out, Mr. Slott said. That can put your heirs into the highest tax rates, he added. Inherited Roth IRAs also must be drawn down within 10 years, but the tax bite is gone. Keeping the money invested until the last year can be a great move for your heirs, Ms. Gates said. That money can grow in the Roth for 10 years after you die. It's unbelievable. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Cockroach. The dreaded insect has been invoked on Wall Street as a way to speak of early signs of trouble in the private credit industry. In recent months, Wall Street bankers have grown increasingly concerned about the private credit market, a largely opaque industry focused on lending to risky companies. The anxiety is intensified since the collapse of two companies in September that were financed by private credit. Some colorful metaphors have ensued. My antenna goes up when things like this happen, Jamie Dimon, chief executive of JP Morgan Chase, said in an October earnings call, adding, "When you see one cockroach, there's probably more." He was implying that the two bankruptcies were early signs of a broader problem with the private credit industry, and the metaphor was soon repeated all over the financial press. In December, a Financial Times editor even called cockroaches a word of the year. Failures in this world are rarely isolated. Amit Saru, a finance professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Business, explained in an email, and one collapse often reveals deeper weaknesses in balance sheets, valuations, or risk management. Private credit is a subset of the world of private equity, involving loans to companies that don't want to deal with traditional banks. The industry has proliferated in recent years, ballooning to $3 trillion. Such firms are not regulated like banks and are not required to tell investors how risky their portfolios are. These firms traditionally relied on investments from long-term institutional investors, such as pension funds. But as the sector has grown, firms have started raising more money from individual investors through mutual funds and other financial products. The structure of regulations was set up before private credit funds took off, said Arthur Labby, a vice dean and professor at Rutgers Law School. In 2026, the investors in these funds have gone beyond wealthy and sophisticated individuals and firms who don't need these protections. Shares of Blue Owl Capital, the largest publicly traded firm dedicated to private credit, have fallen more than 50% over the past year. A major worry is that software companies, which rely heavily on private lending, will falter because of advances in artificial intelligence. Lately, the system is moving from a period of benign conditions to one where underlying risks become visible, Dr. Saru noted. Regulators and concerned onlookers are always looking for warning signs of potential distress, said Natasha Sarin, a professor at Yale Law School and the president of the Yale Budget Lab. Because financial firms are enmeshed with so much of the economy, any weaknesses in the financial architecture have potentially seismic effects. The scare over private credit has spawned other metaphors. In November, Jeffrey Gundlach, a billionaire bond investor, likened the market to the Wild West. He continued, "And it starts out with the sheriff in town and things are going pretty well. But then as the frontier town grows, more people come in trying to exploit opportunity." Lloyd Blankfein, the former chief executive of Goldman Sachs, said last month, "I don't feel the storm, but the horses are starting to whinny in the corral." And Boaz Weinstein, a hedge fund manager, said at a conference, "All you need is the snowball to start going down the hill," and it started. On Wall Street, Mr. Labby said, such language allows insiders to talk to one another in ways other in-group members will understand, and crucially, offers a way to communicate a problem with some emotional salience, but without a sense of panic. Steering away from driverless car anxiety. The task starts with a recognition that earning the public's trust is the safety of self-driving vehicles will not be easy. On a recent trip to San Francisco, I hopped in a Waymo at the airport for a nearly 30-mile journey to Mountain View, California. As the car merged onto the 101, I assumed the smooth jazz playing in the car was meant to soothe my nerves and help me forget that there was no human in the driver's seat. Waymo, a self-driving car company owned by Google's parent Alphabet, is in 10 American cities, including Miami and Dallas, and is eyeing New York City, London, and Tokyo next. The company has its own app and partners with ride-hailing services like Uber, and by the end of this year, it expects to serve up 1 million rides weekly. Last month, Waymo raised $16 billion, giving it a valuation around $126 billion to help with its expansion plans. Still, many people are wary of self-driving cars. The company's co-chief executive, Takindra Mawakana, knows she needs to earn the public's trust. It won't be easy. Waymo is facing federal investigations for traffic violations. The company issued a recall of some of its vehicles in December after its robo-taxis illegally passed stop school buses. Its cars have also been involved in more serious incidents, including an ambulance blocked from getting to the scene of a shooting in Austin, a cat killed in San Francisco, and a child struck in Santa Monica. In response to the episode involving the child, Ms. Mawakana said that the car had been going 17 miles per hour and it had slowed to 6 miles per hour once it sensed the child nearby. That's superhuman performance, she said. A human would not have been able to do that. Is having contact with a child what we want? No. Is the fact that she got up and walked away really important to say? Yes. As the company's other chief executive, Dmitry Dolgov, focuses on the technology behind the vehicles, Ms. Mawakana, a trained lawyer who previously did public policy for eBay and Yahoo, spends her days making the case to lawmakers and the public that accidents involving Waymo vehicles are rare compared with ones involving human drivers. We have a higher bar, Ms. Mawakana, 54, said. We have a higher burden of proof for all of society. This interview, which was conducted at Waymo's headquarters in Mountain View, has been edited and condensed for clarity. Let's talk about safety. Do you think the number of accidents involving Waymo's vehicles will eventually be zero? We are always improving. How much safer than a human will we get to? We don't know. What I can tell you, though, is it won't be zero. It's a really, really challenging reality to grapple with. Waymo has had to respond to the accidents that its cars have been in. How do you approach these conversations? It's really important for us to recognize that because the technology is so new, the burden is on us. There's so much pressure to say what happened before we know what happened. We have to be disciplined. We will say what happens after we take the moment we need. Elon Musk's Tesla robotaxis and Amazon's Zoox driverless cars use different technology. Are you worried about different robotaxis on the road? This is, to me, where the government has a role to play. I think the regulators should issue a national standard so everyone is demonstrating their safety. We share the roads, but we've really built the Waymo driver to operate on the roads as they exist today. We don't want anything to happen that undermines the trust that we're working so hard to build. Because it's not just building trust in our brand, it's building trust in this new product category. In dense cities like New York City and London, there are traffic rules that human drivers sometimes have to skirt to not block traffic. How do regulators want Waymo to deal with this gray area? I think what you're saying is there's a letter of the law, and then there's the custom of a place. Some of those customs are what the Waymo driver learns over time. When we were first in Chandler, Arizona, this was 2020-2019, if there was a double-parked UPS truck, we stay behind it far longer than any human would. Now we cross over the double yellow line to go around it. Technically, that's not what you're supposed to do, but the technology understands that that's exactly what you have to do in order to not block traffic. Waymo wants its fleets in New York City next. How will you navigate a complicated city like New York? New York is complicated for the same things that we have seen in San Francisco, which is there's a lot of congestion. There's pedestrians, there's cyclists, there's jaywalkers, there's double parked cars, there's bike lanes, and sometimes there's mounds of snow. The other reason New York is complicated is because the regulatory path isn't clear yet. The governor recently pivoted from moving forward with robotaxis this year. We're going to continue to partner with her because we think this is a really important technology for New Yorkers to have access to. It will be odd if we are in a lot of major cities around the world and New York is excluded from them. Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania and others have said robotaxis can lead to job loss. What's your response to this? Now that we've been a few markets for a few years, it's great to be able to see that we haven't eliminated jobs in those markets. Humans are still rotating those tires and working on those vehicles. We have fleet operators, we have fleet technicians. All of our fleets are fully electric. Those charging companies are building the infrastructure, putting them in city centers, pulling those wires from the utility company. I was recently in Los Angeles and my Uber driver saw a Waymo driving past and he said he was concerned that autonomous vehicles would hurt his income. That driver wants long trips. We want very efficient, high-volume trips. We are actually both benefiting by slightly different types of demand. Ride-hailing isn't the only application that we're focused on as a business. We will license our technology to automotive companies. So the same person who has a business driving people could own a Waymo in the future and decide how best to deploy it. Do you see a time when Waymo moves away from ride-hailing for that broader application? I think there's room for all, but consumers are going to decide. I see a world where personal car ownership and city centers are so expensive that people are going to prefer ride-hailing and never having to find a parking space. You were born in Mississippi and raised in Atlanta. What is a formative memory you have from that time? Both of my parents are from Mississippi, born and raised. My dad was in the Air Force, and I spent time in Mississippi every summer, which is actually, I think, one of the most important parts of who I am. My dad is one of these people who can build a house by himself. He always said, if you have your hands, you can make anything. I started to feel that at such a young age. The cousins made fun of me and my brother because we would be like, time to go feed the pigs, or time to get the eggs from the chickens. That was fun for us. It was really this understanding that you can create something out of something quite small, and it can sustain the family or sustain the town. I believe you did some crisis management work as a lawyer. How does that experience fit with what you have to do now as co-CEO of Waymo? When I came for the interview with Waymo, it was the week Waymo spun out of the Google self-driving car project, so the name Waymo was brand new. It needed to be introduced. It was really exciting, but also extremely audacious. It was a brand new brand. If it doesn't terrify you, that's probably not the right next role for you. It definitely terrified me, and I just remember being like, put me in, coach. Either it's going to work wonderfully or it's not. But it was my first chance to be a part of a moonshot. Make something without preconceived presumptions. You're one of the few black women running a large company in corporate America right now. How do you think about your presence? I'm always and forever standing on the shoulders of everyone who went before, whether they have this role or not. The reality is, every single accomplishment helped land the next accomplishment. Lightning round. How often do you ride in a Waymo? It depends where I am in the world. If I'm in San Francisco, LA, Phoenix, then I only take them, period. When you get in a Waymo, what's the first thing you look at to make sure the car is operating as it should? Cleanliness. I really want to make sure that people are getting a premium experience. What do you most often do when you're in a Waymo? I'm usually between meetings, so I'm looking at notes for the next meeting or getting out a thank you from the last meeting. What's your biggest pet peeve as CEO? People being so comfortable with the state of the roads as they exist today. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times business section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Wealthy, but less charitable these days. A philanthropic project started in 2010 emerges as a punchline amid its struggle for big donors. Just a few months after Warren Buffett convened a series of high-end dinners across America to collect signatures for something called the Giving Pledge, he was feeling optimistic about his new idea for philanthropy. Seated in May 2010 at Charlie Rose's circular table next to his partners in the effort, a smiling Melinda French Gates and her husband Bill, Mr. Buffett foresaw something revolutionary. "We're talking trillions over time," Mr. Buffett said. "You hope to establish a new norm." One by one, the world's richest people would be persuaded to commit over half of their money to nonprofit causes. In just a few short months, we've made good progress, Mr. Buffett said that December, as 17 more families joined in. A week later, Mr. Buffett and the Gateses made their first of 2 visits with President Obama to talk about the pledge in the Oval Office. They were back to the White House 7 months later when Mr. Obama lavished praise on the pledge in the 30-minute session with a few dozen signers, according to a person in the room. In those heady times, it was unmistakably fashionable to sign the Giving Pledge, which started with Mr. Rose's gauzy TV interview and a Fortune cover story. The project was born in an era when people like Mr. Gates epitomized a humanitarian culture that espoused both big capitalism and big philanthropy. Being seen as a good billionaire who gave back was important. Republicans and Democrats alike embraced the Gates Foundation's priorities: the U.S. education, global health, and gender equality. Now, it's stylish, in a Silicon Valley contrarian sort of way, to bash the Giving Pledge. Over the past 2 years, there's been a growing backlash from the billionaires who are its target donors. One of its first signers suggested he was amending his pledge to account for his for-profit ventures. Another signed it, and then in an occurrence without precedent, unsigned it. No Oval Office visits anymore. President Trump's team describes the pledge as almost a punchline. There's even a quiet campaign by one pro-Trump tech billionaire to destroy it. Instead of signing up for nonpartisan philanthropy, some billionaires seeking impact are looking for a more direct route, spending more than ever on American elections. The zeitgeist has changed very fast. Aaron Horvath, a sociologist who has studied the Giving Pledge, called it a time capsule of that 2010 era. It feels old school, he said. Billionaires, he said, now think, I can keep my head down and keep making money. I don't have to put up with this charity charade anymore. This is an era of a more voracious capitalism, of billionaires trending right and getting ahead by embracing an administration that is happy to dole out favors. Many of today's ascendant billionaires are dismissive of philanthropy as nothing more than public relations. In this worldview, the real way to give back is via business success to the redown of the U.S. economy. Elon Musk, the world's wealthiest person, has said that his businesses are philanthropy, and that's all to say nothing of how the public perception of one of the pledge's figureheads, Mr. Gates, has blown up over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. That scandal led to his divorce from Ms. French Gates in 2021 and her ultimate exit from the foundation, which administers the pledge, in 2024. The Gates Foundation itself, meanwhile, is out of season in politics. Its causes, such as global health, have been attacked mercilessly by the Trump administration. Peter Thiel, the tech billionaire and a frequent Gates critic, said in an interview that he had privately encouraged around a dozen Giving Pledge signers to undo it. Most of the ones I've talked to have at least expressed regret about signing it, he said. He has his own Epstein ties, but he calls the pledge an Epstein-adjacent fake boomer club. John Arnold, a Houston billionaire who made money as an energy trader and was one of the earliest signers, said that what looks like tough times for the pledge are really just tough times for nonprofits. There was a backlash against a lot of charitable giving, he said, and the pledge kind of got swept up in that because it became synonymous with billionaire giving. The slowdown. The Giving Pledge did, as Mr. Buffett hoped, indeed establish something of a new norm in philanthropy. More than 250 families signed it, including those of Mike Bloomberg, Sam Altman, and Mackenzie Scott. The pledge became a way for uber wealthy to announce they'd arrived. Ms. Scott signed in 2019 after her split from Jeff Bezos. A year later, she began her enormous rapid-fire philanthropic giving. Mr. Arnold is another of its most successful stories. Forbes estimated that he and his wife Laura have given away over 40% of their net worth to charity, almost all since signing it, and they're only in their early 50s. In its early years, the Giving Pledge helped build norms where few existed, said Taryn Jensen, who now runs the pledge. Our goal is to keep building a culture where giving is the norm and to provide the support that helps turn commitment into action. But the rate of signers has plummeted in recent years. In the pledge's first 5 years, 113 people signed, 72 in the next 5 years, and just 43 in the next 5, including a mere 4 signers in 2024. Last year was a relatively successful year by recent standards, with 14 signers, including Craig Newmark of Craigslist and Drew Houston of Dropbox. The value proposition has changed because of the erosion of general trust, the polarization of everything over the last years, said Tom Tierney, who advises wealthy donors at Bridgespan, one of the nonprofit sector's blue-chip advisory firms, and is on the board of the Gates Foundation. You're more likely to be criticized for giving large amounts of money away now than praised. That probably wasn't as true 15 years ago, he said, citing contention around extreme wealth. The first signers were largely in the personal social circles of Mr. Buffett and the Gateses, bona fide American business celebrities who are greeted with adoring press. Nowadays, signers are increasingly based overseas or are lower profile. Media coverage is dutiful. The requirements for participation aren't very high. Signers must assent to news release and typically a letter posted publicly on the foundation website about the commitment. They're invited to the optional annual gathering of fellow billionaires held at a luxury resort. And then there's the actual giving, for which there's no mechanism of enforcement. Even at the onset, Mr. Buffett stressed to Mr. Rose it was just a moral pledge. The Giving Pledge does not track whether its signers make any progress toward their commitments. Officials have long worried about seeming like nags, and they don't press signers to give anything in particular. Since Mr. Trump started his second term, the pledge has tried to guide its signers ever so gently toward supporting the public health programs decimated by his administration's cuts. The pledge said that its approach has always been issue agnostic. Terms like net worth, charity, and even billionaire all offer plenty of wiggle room. There's all kinds of grayness, said Mr. Tierney, who added that most signers he knows intend to give away most of their billions only after they die. Research published last summer by left-wing critics of the pledge argued that very few signers were actually giving away their money at a fast enough rate to drive down their net worth. Most philanthropic donations went to intermediary organizations, they said, such as their own foundations, or happened en masse after they died, which technically satisfies the pledge. Ms. Jensen said many signers have already met their commitment or are steadily working toward them. Still, for someone on the right, like Mr. Thiel, there's a symbolic point to be made in his campaign against the pledge. I've strongly discouraged people from signing it, and then I have gently encouraged them to unsign it, Mr. Thiel said. His own charitable philosophy is centered on for-profit businesses. His foundation principally funds those who drop out of college to create startups. Vinod Kosia, a venture capitalist close to Mr. Gates, said asked Mr. Thiel to sign in the early 2010s. Mr. Thiel told Mr. Khosla that he did not consider it a high-status community. They got an incredible number of people to sign up those first 4 or 5 years, and it somehow has really run out of energy, Mr. Thiel said, positing that some of the people who sign it now aren't even billionaires. The pledge says it is open to those whose net worth is under $1 billion, but plan to give away at least $500 million and are in a position to do so. I don't know if the branding is outright negative, but it feels way less important for people to join. More recently, he has privately encouraged Elon Musk, a 2012 signer, to unsign it. He told Mr. Musk that his money would go to left-wing nonprofits that will be chosen by Bill Gates, according to a speech he gave. Mr. Thiel told The Times he believed that quitting the pledge outright feels very, very dangerous, and people sort of feel blackmailed to stay on the public list of signers. There may be a lot of ways to undo it that are short of big public statement. Ron Conway, a venture capitalist signer who is close to Mr. Gates, said comments like Mr. Thiel's made less sense to him. Mr. Conway, who is active in Democratic politics, said the Giving Pledge had plenty of conservatives and moderates. Some people say that the Giving Pledge is aligned with liberal causes, or is woke, so to speak, and that couldn't be further from the truth, he said. The backlash grows. The first tangible evidence of souring came 2 summers ago from Brian Armstrong, a co-founder of Coinbase, who had happily signed the pledge in 2019 at the urging of Mr. Gates' friends like Mr. Conway. Mr. Armstrong, an outspoken crypto executive who now evinces a disdain for liberal politics, attended at least one pledge gathering. But just 5 years later, he was suddenly out. One day in mid-2024, Mr. Armstrong's letter vanished from the pledge website. The pledge said that his exit was voluntary. He has never said anything publicly about why he left the community, and he did not return requests for comment to elaborate on his decision. Mr. Thiel was uninvolved in his move, but upon reading the news, he said he couldn't help expressing his approval to Mr. Armstrong. Before him, the only people to leave or be forced out of the Giving Pledge were a handful of criminals and con men like Sam Bankman-Fried, who removed himself from the community before the pledge could formally oust him. A year after Mr. Armstrong unsigned, Larry Ellison, who had been another of the first batch of signers 15 years earlier, said in a rare post on X that he was suddenly amending his pledge. While he still believed in the Gates-led agreement, he wrote he was also seeking to channel his money into for-profit initiatives like a program at the University of Oxford that technically would not fall under the nonprofit rubric of the Giving Pledge. Mr. Ellison's unusual letter, addressed to whom it may concern, remains untouched on the Giving Pledge website. He has not returned requests for comment on what he meant. Scott Bessent, Mr. Trump's Treasury Secretary, has gotten in on the flogging. At the DealBook Summit in early December, he described a panic among the billionaire class during the global financial crisis that led to the Giving Pledge, which he called well-intentioned but very amorphous. A more concrete accomplishment, Mr. Bessent said, was something like the $6 billion donation from Michael and Susan Dell, who have not signed the pledge but are funding Trump accounts that could ride the waves of the stock market to create nest eggs for lower-income children, mixing philanthropy with capitalism. Tech billionaires in the Trump era have tended to bash traditional nonprofit philanthropy more generally. In a podcast with the Free Press founder Barry Weiss in 2024, the tech investor Mark Anderson, also not a pledge signer, described an unspoken deal that used to exist. Billionaires would make money, give back through philanthropy, and then be praised by the media and society. In 2014, Vogue profiled Mr. Anderson's philanthropist wife, Laura, writing that she was the one persuading this new generation of tech tycoons to give their riches away. That washes away all your sins, Mr. Anderson said, reclassifies you as from a sort of suspect business mogul to a virtuous philanthropist. I have gently encouraged them to unsign it, Peter Thiel. Now the entire deal is broken and Mr. Anderson visibly upset. He now regularly complains about the rise of woke ideology within the nonprofit sector that turns people against the tech sector and the wealthy, something that, in private conversations, he has stressed even to nonprofits he has supported in the past. Not all billionaires have turned away from giving, of course. It is sad to me that many wealthy individuals, especially in the tech industry, have recently adopted a cynical and nihilistic attitude that philanthropy is inevitably fraudulent or useless, wrote Dario Amodei, a co-founder of Anthropic, in a January essay. And yet, befitting the times, even the 43-year-old Mr. Amodei hasn't signed the pledge himself. Anthropic has ties to the so-called effective altruist movement, which prioritizes charity, but is also far more concerned than the Giving Pledge is with whether the charity is effective. The founding three. The pledge's 3 founders remain committed to their project, but age, divorce, and scandal have complicated the picture. Mr. Buffett, now 95, told the Times that he has had second thoughts about some of his philanthropic commitments that were not feasible, such as ideas that I had 60 or so years ago.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,